We're joined by Mark Calabria. He's a former senior staffer on the Senate Banking Committee, now the Director of Financial Regulation Studies at the Cato Institute. Mark, welcome back to Bloomberg News. Always good to have you on.
Oh, always great to be here.
Mark, is this going to pass?
I would give it close to 90%. I mean, it's worth keeping in mind. Specter was gone yesterday, as Megan mentioned. Also, Harry Reid voted against the bill solely for procedural reasons. So the reality was you were only one vote short yesterday, and Harry Reid has made sort of implications that he was under the impression that Scott Brown was going to vote for it. So he thought he had 60. So the question is really, can you pick up one more vote? And I think they're almost definitely going to pick up one more vote today.
Mark, you said 90%. Talk to me about your 10% concerns. What are they?
Well, and this is not necessarily concerns about the policies. I think if you had all the Democrats stick together yesterday, more Republicans would have broke for it. But once Republicans on the floor saw that Cantwell and Feingold were breaking from the bill and that it might not get cloture, there was largely a decision by Republicans at that point to say, well, this might not actually get cloture, so let's vote against it. Right now, I think that it looks like that you probably won't get Cantwell. You might get Feingold. You're definitely going to have Specter there. So, as I said, you only need to pull off one. There's been a lot of pressure put on Brown. Right now, the Democrats' leadership is trying to decide, you know, do I need to get that one vote from my progressive wing, or do I want to reach out to a couple moderate Republicans to pick up a vote? And so I think there's a very good chance they'll get a moderate Republican on board.
And Mark, talk to me quickly about that split in the Democratic Party, because as you mentioned, you do have some in the progressive wing and some on the other side of this debate. There's still a little bit of wiggle room for them, isn't there?
There isn't. There's a lot of tension. They've been, you know, I'll give them credit. I think Harry Reid and Chris Dodd have managed to keep those divisions largely behind the scenes and tried to dampen them. But you've seen them, you know, Brown-Kaufman amendment where they were going to essentially split up the big banks. There were a number of other amendments. They got Bernie Sanders to basically, you know, cut in half his Fed audit.
And what about Blanche Lincoln's amendment as well?
Oh, yeah. Well, and they've danced around on this partly because of her primary coming up, where they've wanted to do a derivatives amendment that the administration would be comfortable with, which would be far friendlier to Wall Street than what Blanche Lincoln has put out there. And I think that's ultimately going to get resolved in conference. But there's really been this tension between a number of progressive members of the Democrat caucus who really want to be very tough on banks, who are not convinced that the bill actually does enough. Senator Feingold, for instance, yesterday said this bill would not have prevented the financial crisis. I mean, and I tend to agree with that maybe for different reasons. But you do have a real big tension here between largely the Wall Street wing of the Democrat Party and the progressive wing of the Democrat Party. I think ultimately they'll be able to get enough votes to keep that together. Maybe part of the surprise yesterday was you only had 2 members of the progressive wing actually vote against cloture.
Mark, we have about 30 seconds left. I want to ask you, any concerns that it appears that in this legislation there's nothing to address concerns that some lawmakers have about Fannie and Freddie?
I think that's a very big concern. There was a McCain-Shelby amendment that was defeated. The bill does absolutely nothing on Freddie and Fannie. Not only does it not cap the losses the taxpayer currently faces, but there's really no exit plan. There's no strategy for how do we fix that. And I think a lot of lawmakers and a lot of the American public see that Freddie and Fannie were a very large part of this crisis.
And Mark, we have about 15 seconds left. This passes. How does it change the landscape in your view?
To some extent, I'm not sure that I think it changes it a whole lot. The bill is full of discretionary delegation to the regulators, stuff like capital, stuff like prudential standards, where really what it says is you regulators will go out and be tough, but it gives a lot of discretion. And it's really the same regulators who are making decision-making before. There are a lot of things even the banking industry has expressed concern about that are full of holes.
All right. Mark Calabria, Cato Institute, Director of Financial Regulation Studies, joining us from Washington. Mark, always good to have you on. Thanks.